Welcome back to Software Without Borders, where we explore the ever-evolving world of software and its impact on businesses and industries worldwide. I'm your co-host, Andy Hilliard, CEO of Accelerance, and with me today is my co-host, Olivier Poulard, Managing Director of Software Strategies at Accelerance.
Thank you, Andy. And today we're thrilled to have Jeff Andrews join us. So I've known Jeff for about 15 years. He's a seasoned technology executive with a deep background in cloud, SaaS, and enterprise systems, and also offshoring, if I'm not mistaken. So, welcome, Jeff.
Well, thank you, Olivier. Thank you, Andy. It's great to be here and sharing my experiences with y'all.
And Jeff, we're excited to hear your insights on navigating the challenges of modern product development. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to kick off here. We like to start these shows with a little bit of background, a little bit of context, so we know who we're talking to and where they've been and the journey that they've had. So I mean, you do have an impressive background, as Olivier said, in various technology sectors, including cloud, SaaS, and enterprise systems. Can you share a little bit into your journey into product and technology leadership, and maybe why did you specialize in these areas?
Yeah, I think it was just the natural evolution of things. I mean, I've been doing this for over 30 years. Oh, ouch, that hurts to say. But I think over the time, I've just been one of those who, if I've been asked to step up, right, I step up, and through that, I've been able to grow my career and and to address why these different industries, I mean, these are the ones that are just ever dynamic, right? With ever changing technology needs. And it just seems to never get bored, right? I'm not just, querying stuff out of a database and presenting it on a screen, right? We're solving real problems.
Yeah. I mean, when you were in your teens, maybe, or your 20s, did you have an idea or a vision, or like most people, did you just do the task at hand and try to do the best you could, and then sort of doors opened up, or did
I thank my parents, first of all, for giving me what I think is a great work ethic, right? And so it was always, go the extra mile, right? And for me, I mean, I actually started off wanting to be a car designer, an automobile designer, right? And so I went to school for aerospace engineering. Long story short, one of our classes required us to do Fortran development. And I was like the only kid in the class to actually complete the assignment. And it dawned on me, I think I might be best suited for this line of work. And so that's the change, thank goodness, because it's been very, very good to me.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because, I'll admit it, I've been in the software industry for 30 years, and I took a CS class back in the 80s and even the early 80s. And I could never finish my assignments. It didn't connect with me. I literally had to go to the professor and beg for forgiveness, promised that I would complete the assignment, and then hope that he would forget that I promised and skate through with a C or a B. That's not a very flattering story I'm telling about myself, but some of us were meant to lead, and others were meant to not have to do the hard work of it. It just, there's certain things you're adept at and certain things you aren't. But, so you found you had a special talent around that, and that's great that you gravitated towards that, and that because if you like what you're doing and you feel like you can do it well, I mean that's a source of happiness and energy, and that's a signal kind of that you were meant to do this, and this is what makes you happy. And so I'm glad you realize that. A lot of people don't. They feel like they need to do something, and they don't see the messages and they end up not being as happy as they could be if they were just open themselves up and realize what they enjoyed. So anyway, just to move on here. So I mean, you've held key leadership positions, at pretty impressive companies like Auction Edge and Flagship Solutions. Can you tell me a little bit about how these experiences have shaped your perspective on product development?
For sure. I mean, I think it just boils down to it emphasizes the importance of speed to market, right? I think with it being such a digital age, right? Companies are wanting to get the most out of their digital ideas, right? Because they know it's not going to last long, not going to last forever, right? So those who can get their digital idea out there, their software out there earliest, right? They're going to be the ones who can grow and prosper, right? Basically a company's 15 minutes of fame, right? And so it's just working with these places just emphasizes, hey, you've got to move fast and you have to just be nimble as all get out.
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine that. When you were, what sort of leadership skills did you hone at some of these companies, or did you bring into these companies and then maybe alter based on your experience there, and maybe that augmented your skill sets, over time? Can you sort of talk about how you evolved as a leader? And, through these different experiences, as we walk through life, we gather more experiences and we throw out some things that maybe weren't as valuable, and we gather more things that are, and, we just evolve as professionals.
Yeah. I mean, for me, again, fortunate that I had some pretty good mentors. And my first ever CTO role was, just had a great CEO that, he just encouraged servant leadership. And I just gravitated to that because though I have done some pretty cool things technically, right? I mean, I've done some really nice stuff that people depend on. The proudest moments I have had in my career are the moments that have grew other people, right? Bringing people up, and I just really take pride in that. So,
what's your definition? I'm very curious about that because I'm a huge proponent of servant leadership, and frankly, in the world of outsourcing, when you're dealing across borders and time zones and stuff, taking that approach is so critically important. And Americans tend to be somewhat transactional and not servant leaders. So, I mean, can you tell me about how you define that? Because I want to make sure our audience, has a good feeling of what that means from Jeff in action, servant leadership in action.
Yeah, I think it's best defined and understood if you take the typical company organizational chart, right? From top down, and flip it over, right? Flip it over. And it's the leaders need to be propping their people up, right? So I am trying to help them grow their careers to achieve what they want out of their experiences while at the company, or, giving them that the ability to go far, to research stuff, to make mistakes on their own, right? I always tell my kids, right, as they were growing up, I'm like, if I never let you touch the stove, right, because I knew it was hot, right? I could let you find out it was hot, right? But I'm not going to. And so I think one of the things I try to do is give my people the freedom to make mistakes, right? But if they're going to be on a route where they're going to touch the stove, I step in. I don't want anyone touching the stove. Just believe me, I've been there, done that.
Okay, but let's make one thing clear. Your stakeholders, your executives, that's all nice value-based leadership and kumbaya. But what's in it? What's in it for the company, and how does it benefit the company?
Oh, I think it benefits the company because it drives more continuity across the teams, right? Retention is huge, right? And if you retain employees, and Andy, in this particular industry, right? I mean, 18 months is considered, a long-term investment. So, the places I've been, the people I've, been, I've had the privilege to manage, they stay, 3 years, or 4, as long as I'm there. And so, that's a lot of knowledge, a lot of tacit knowledge that the company doesn't lose, that they can take advantage of, and that helps them prosper.
Hey, listening audience, if you take one thing out of this podcast, even if you drop off right now, that's one thing that you need to take away, because literally there is massive amounts of time and, frankly, millions of dollars of development gained or lost by creating an environment of trust and empowerment and continuity. Like Jeff says, you're going to get you're going to get better commitment, better product to market faster. So I'm glad you brought that up.
And talking about trust and servant leadership. So I know you have very strong understanding of agile frameworks, and how to build agile teams and how to manage them. How do you see the role of agile methodologies in driving success in today's dynamic business environment? And I will qualify as internally as well as externally.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think it brings adaptability, right? It brings that early and frequent feedback, right? Again, going back to my comment at the start of the show, right? It gives you, the company, the ability to move faster to market, right? Because, right, the whole idea is we're developing for the known right now, right? Just what's being asked for, right? And we're not worried about the future of maybe we'll need this, maybe we'll need that, and let's try to account for it. No, let's just account for, do what we need that's being asked for, because the future may be a lot different, right? It might, it might just totally change. And I will tell you honestly, my belief is agile doesn't work in places and companies where it's not adopted from the top down. I mean, the whole company needs to be bought in, because you have to work with product managers, the marketeers, a plethora of folks, right? And if they're not on the same wavelength and process, right, you're doomed to fail.
It has to be across the board. I completely agree with you. Your organization will be as weak as the weakest link. So you have to implement agile across the board. Otherwise, it defeats the purpose, really.
Right.
So have you seen, so you said, it doesn't work in certain companies. Is it also, it doesn't work for certain industries? Or, because I know you have worked across diverse industries. I mean, a lot of them, just to name a few: aviation, automotive now, but of course, cloud services, for instance, this type of thing. So do you feel that, having dealt with so many clients and so many different industries, especially when you were in the cloud services, for instance, have you seen a huge difference from industry to industry in terms of agile or anything else for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, again, right, we're talking religion now, right? And, it's my belief that, first you have to know what industry you're in and the specifics of that industry, right? Because you could be bound by laws, standards, compliance, right? Which, hey, I want to be nimble, but I really can't because I have a certain set of design criteria upfront submitted so it can be reviewed, et cetera. And I've been to places where they're trying to get CMMI compliant, right? But they're, shoving in that agile process, right? They're pounding to fit, painting to match agile because that's the buzzword, right? That's the buzz SDLC of the day. So I just think it all depends on your industry and what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Olivier?
No, I completely agree with that. Some of the standards are not compatible with agile. So if you want to be nimble, but your context or your ecosystem does not enable you to be nimble, you can always call yourself agile because you have sprints, you have Scrum, you have something else, one of those buzzwords. But in the end, it doesn't change the mindset. In the end, agile is about the mindset more than just a set of tasks and teams organized in a certain way or another way. Or without the mindset, agile is to me nothing.
And how do you promote the mindset? According to you? Or according to Jeff or you?
Oh man, how do you promote them? I think through education. I've had to do this in the past of educating my CEO once, because, he wanted, deliverables by a specific date. Okay. Well, that just throws agility out the window because you're dictating what has to be done and by when. And when you do that, you're going to really sacrifice or put your deliverable in a very precarious situation because developers are going to meet that deadline, but at what cost? So,
do you need to then sort of act as a filter between expectations and methodology versus how you maintain the agile mindset within the development community? And somehow, as a manager like yourself, by its very nature, you're a filter and a between stakeholders and getting work done. And maybe you hear one thing and then you translate it to the working class.
Yes, that is it. All right. So, yes, filter is a good term. Is a good term, I guess. I think once I always, sometimes I just explain the rules of two, right? Faster, better, cheaper, right? Mr. CEO, what two qualities are most important to you, right? You tell me, and that's how we'll run, right? The other thing that I've been able to say, right, because a lot of the non-tech people, right, think software is just easy, right? Well, why can't you just put something here or make it do this and make it do that? And my retort to them is, well, all you need to do is get them to sign on the dotted line, right? Well, there's a lot more that goes into sales. There's a lot more that goes into software, right? So I think, educating, right, and forcing the stakeholders to, put their feet in our shoes, right? I think that really helps out. And
if they feel the same pain, I think it helps. But the problem is that they will never feel that pain because they cannot get in our shoes. One thing to consider about agile is that I think there are two groups of people that you need to talk to. One is stakeholders, the leaders, the people who have the money, who make decisions, and then the worker bees, basically the ones, and across the board. I'm not just talking about engineering, but product management, support, operations, etc. DevOps is one of those concepts. Dev on one side, ops working together. DevOps has become a group on its own, which makes absolutely no sense. But Dev and Ops working together, product and Dev working together with Ops and support and the customer. In fact, the customer has to be involved as well. So to change the mindset, I think is one way that I did it in the past was to gather the people. They were very waterfall. So they had adopted waterfall and they were doing everything waterfall. And obviously they had seen some of the limitations of waterfall. One being, well, you define everything and it takes years before you see something. So based on that basis, basically without talking about agile, you just ask them, okay, is there another way to do it so that I could see maybe partial results early? And they come up on their own. Guess what? It's agile. Yeah. Another thing is the mindset change also when you start talking about delivering working software or outcome-based working software, as opposed to I'm a business analyst. My role is to write requirements or specifications or analyze requirements or something. I'm an architect. I'm putting together some blueprints, and I'm a programmer, so I'm coding. No. Altogether, coding towards working software, requirements working software, architecture towards working software. That's really, and once you change that mindset, people become more agile, if you will, because they will need to show working software on a regular basis. It's not at the very end, because at the very end, that might be software, but is it working software?
Yeah, and to your point, Olivier, I mean, again, going back to the education of the CEOs and stakeholders that aren't familiar with Agile, right? Once you include them in that first demo, that, first, sprint demo, right? And they're getting to see, the fruits of the labor, right? 2 weeks in as opposed to 2 months out, right? And I think that helps build, that helps build the confidence, right, of the CEOs, and to say, okay, all right, our company's on the right path. We're doing the right things and such. So
I remember, that large project, and about it, Jeff, obviously. And people had been working on that departure control system for airlines, and they had not seen a single line of code, nothing, in 2 years. I come in, it takes me 3 months to put this agile process, 2 years of requirements, architecture, and that kind of stuff. It's a DCS, departure control system, is mission critical. Nothing takes off if that thing is down at the airport. Let's put it this way. So very afraid of, people are afraid of producing something. And again, the mindset, you said, you can make mistake. You can make a mistake. You can make mistakes. On the contrary, produce something because you're going to learn from it. Guess what? We put this agile methodology in place. Once it was in place, it took me 3 months to put it in place. Once it was in place, we managed to deliver and demo the first lines of code within 2 weeks. And the product manager was in awe. It was just amazing. Wow, I've been waiting for this for 2 years, and you did it in 2 weeks. Yeah. And not the whole product, of course, but small slices. But at least it had a huge impact on the engineering credibility. What we were able to do and how fast and then very, very quickly, every 2 weeks we had a new release.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's interesting. So let's talk about one of the most difficult thing, agile or not, and especially not agile, is to scale, right? Can you tell us more about your strategy to scale, knowing that about 50 or 60% of software projects are commissioned from the US or funded in the US, and only 16, 17% of engineering is in the US, right? So we have a huge gap between who can produce software and how much needs to be produced? How do you scale? What do you do to scale?
Man, it all starts again. I know this sounds like, like a canned answer and stuff, but I mean, you really have to, first of all, know the problems that are trying to be solved, right? And when you go to scale, right, you need to be addressing just those problems. It can be it can be frustrating when somebody comes to you, right, and they have this huge, monolith, this monolith architecture, right, and they're super proud of it, right, but to scale, it's not going to help you because, well, we'll take like a standard web server, right? I mean, everyone knows what a web server is, right? Back in the day, right? I mean, these things were monoliths, right? And you had all of these processes within the process, and if any of the process goes down, it takes the whole web server with it, right? And so going to today's modern microservices architectures in the cloud and such, right? I mean, I think that's the key to scaling, right? And again, you have to know what you're trying to solve, and if you can break pieces out in their smallest manageable chunks, right? You're going to have more success, definitely.
Yeah. And excuse my French when I say garbage in, garbage out, right?
That's
so
right.
To your point, you need to know what you need to solve the right problem. If you have the garbage in, you will get the garbage out. What was that?
I said, can you say that in English? Excuse my French.
I'll try next time. I'll try better next time.
You should at least say it in French.
Gaspillage.
Hey, let me just change it real quickly here, and then that is, as is typical in these podcasts, we find a little nugget that seems really interesting, and all of a sudden we start just dogpiling on it, which is actually great because it just it's I think it's more interesting for the audience. But I also wanted to cover a little bit of breadth also about your evolution as a leader, Jeff, and you're constantly trying to stay current with latest trends and advancements in product development, methodologies and technologies. What have you been thinking about or doing lately in regards to the evolution of Jeff and leadership? And what do you see on the near horizon that you've prioritized, like saying, I really, my next step is I want to get a grasp or leverage, X. Where are you at in that evolution through education and, professional enhancement?
Yeah, I mean, this is one thing that I promote to my teams, right? I don't care who you are, how far in your career you've been, right? You always have something to learn, right? Everybody has something they can teach, and everyone has something they can learn. And so, I think for me, right, I'm trying to keep abreast of where the industry is going. I mean, it's technology, right? I mean, there are many branches and many forks, right? And for me, I'm just really trying to understand and predict, what's going to come next, right? Because I believe the job of a CTO, right, isn't just to get product delivered, right? It's to protect the company and its products from competition and competitive products as well. So, for me, it's just engaging in, like market research, and, trends and,
so how do you measure that, and how do you keep yourself and others accountable that you all collectively want to evolve and learn and grow? But it's, I could say like, yeah, I'm evolving and learning and growing. Exactly. How are you evolving, and what are you learning, and how are you growing?
Right. Well, first of all, right, I'm a big believer in investing in oneself, right? And, my biggest piece of advice to that kid coming out of college now, right, in IT, right, the best thing that they can do is invest in themselves, right? And because it's going to get you far. It really will. But I do promote, that, a certain amount of time, right, is dedicated for my teams to learn, to, invent, to research, right, to play around. And it doesn't have to be, doesn't have to deal with anything in the industry, right? I mean, it's just what, interests you, right?
Do you have quarterly reviews or monthly reviews, or how do you?
Yes. So I promote a one-on-one, right? So I always want to keep my finger on the pulse of folks, and I want my managers to keep a pulse on their people. And it's just using those to really gain insight into who's working for you, right? And what their goals are. And I mean, I'm a big believer in sending people to conferences, right? I mean, because really at the end of the day, I mean, I was at reInvent back in December, right? And, they have so many great sessions and things that you would have never thought about. And it's the way one industry, may have solved things, right? You would have never, thought of, that it could, help solve a problem for you, right? So I tend to send folks to the conferences. I keep up, like everybody else, right? I watch a lot of YouTube. But no, really, I really. What? Yeah, tech videos. Yeah.
No, I said cat. I said cat videos, but tech videos.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. That's it. That and but yeah, attending conferences, going to the local meetups, right? I'm always got my news on science and technology, right? Just trying to keep my finger on what's happening in the world.
What keeps you awake at night as far as things that are either imminent or threatening, or like I need to get a grasp on that, and like what's something that's relatively new that's occupying your mind?
A lot of people would think AI.
You would, yeah. That could be an answer.
But for me, it's development cost. I mean, the cost of an IT worker, a programmer in the United States is incredible. I mean, we are the highest paid IT people globally, right? And it's, the second closest to us, right, is Switzerland, right? And they have a huge cost of living over there, right? Yeah. So I get it, right? But what keeps me up at night is I'm not going to be able to afford to develop product, right? Or not onshore, right? Because, it just adds, right? That just adds to the bottom line.
How are you rationalizing? I mean, obviously, I mean, you're on this podcast and we've worked together, and you're a proponent of globally distributed software, which, can take the sting out of the cost of domestic engineering. But then again, if now the next wave is sort of like AI first code development. So like, how are you, your own development team or external development teams, how are they integrating, AI to reduce the cost and increase the speed and improve the quality of development, and those are all cost saving, speed creating, value creating measurements. How are you learning about that?
So we're using AI today, right? I mean, it's helping us to create test cases. It's helping us even create test data, right? So, how many times, in the past is like, how do we get test data to, test against, sometimes in some places they copy production data over. Well, now you got to deal with PII, right? And, have to make sure, things are blocked out or recovered. So, believe it or not, I think AI is really helping us to perform better QE. I think AI, right, just from a development perspective, right, is helping developers. It's my belief, that it's just another extension of the help that's been given developers throughout the decades, right? Back in the 50s, somebody says, hey, I wrote a compiler so you don't have to do that, machine programming, right? Wow, right? Well, you're cheating. Well, okay. Along comes the 70s, the 60s and 70s and punch cards and IDEs in the 80s and, debuggers. I mean, everything's a natural evolution of helping to get speed of delivery done. AI is just another component that helps speed it up.
Do you feel like you're a promoter, motivator, instigator, whatever you want to call it, in a positive sense of that use, and how do you manage the adoption of and how do you check, to make sure that your development team is being proactive about this, but at the same time, risk mitigating your risks associated with it? Do you feel like you're doing a good job, or you could be doing a better job as a leader to make sure that you're being proactive and leading, or without being irresponsible?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I definitely think I'm a promoter of AI, right? I mean, I think it has its place. And I encourage my folks to use it because at the end of the day, even though, it might solve something incorrectly, right? Because it's not always correct, right? Well, it might stimulate an idea or a thought in the developer's head. Because look, for all you developers out there, right, who think, all right, man, this CTO sounds pretty good. Well, let me tell you, I believe that if you're spending more than 4 hours on trying to solve something, you're spinning your wheels, right? Because that's how fast we have to be moving in this day and age, right? So the best way to, get over that hump, right, is, go to your Chat GPT, go to your co-pilots, right? Let that help you, right?
Yeah, gain the efficiencies and then realize that there are going to be mistakes made, but the efficiencies that you're gaining and the knowledge that you're learning far overcompensates the time you need to go back and figure out what you did wrong and how you could do it right the next time.
That's right.
I've run into a lot of people that all they do is nitpick. It's like, well, it does this wrong, it does that wrong. It's like, yeah, but it also does so many things right, so much better and faster. So lean into that. And then figure out how to minimize the problems that are inevitable.
Yeah.
It's human
And
nature,
then
I guess. It's
the
kind of
engineering
strange.
in me, Jeff, the engineering in me needs to ask you, what's your approach to, okay, so AI is just a tool, but put aside the tools. What is your approach to problem solving as an engineer?
Man, breaking down again, breaking things down into smaller pieces, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I, I, I encourage my teams to, have elegant solutions, right? I want elegance, right? But elegance is just another word for simplicity, right? If a solution is
That's
elegant,
exactly
it's
it.
simple, right? And so many times, people want to, try to solve problems that don't exist, or they're trying to optimize while they're coding. And, well, that's all great, but let's code for correctness first. Okay. Let's get it right first. And then we can go back and optimize. We can solve future problems. But yeah, just keep it simply simple, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And too often, engineers tend to overcomplicate things, and then they try to optimize it, which becomes even more complicated or more complex and very costly. And I'm just asking those questions because you were talking about cost. And there's one aspect of cost that, okay, beyond what an engineer costs you per hour or per year, it's also the efficiency of the process and the efficiency of problem solving and the time it takes to do things, right? Because time multiplied by rate, that's your cost. You lower the
That's right.
rate, you lower the cost. But if you have a high rate, maybe you should lower the time that it takes to solve something. So it's two ways of doing things, right? Another way is to have quality embedded into what you're doing. Because if your output is poor quality, you have to redo. So redoing something means more time spent and therefore more cost to your product, right?
That is it, man. It decreases your margins all around. And
Exactly.
let me tell you, your stakeholders and shareholders, you know, they want to see more, right? But I'm going to say this, and I'm going to cause some controversy on your guys' show, right?
Go for it. I challenge you.
You know, one thing that I find today, right, and I don't know if it's because of the accessibility to AI and to all these other tools, but the newer generations, right, I find that their troubleshooting and diagnostic skills lack. Where I'm not going to call us old, but the seasoned folks have, right? I think because we had to break stuff down a little bit more, and we didn't have quite the our best thing was, at the time in the 90s, right, was going to the bookstore and finding a book to see if it can help, right? But pretty much other than that, you were on your own, right? You really had to diagnose why is there a bug? Where is the bug? How did the bug happen? And I see that skill set, fading out today.
I completely agree. There's another factor that has happened is that we have today a lot more resources than we used to have back in the 90s or even early 2000s. Today, it's easy to compile some code and see if it even compiles. Whereas if you do remember, because you start with Fortran and other languages like this, I mean, that was not necessarily the case at the time. So you had to think before you would even code. You had to think before you would even code because it would not compile. It would take some time to compile. And on top of this, you may not have the resources, memory, disk, etc., to accommodate your piece of code. So you had to design for it.
That's absolutely right. And, even the languages today with built-in garbage collections and stuff. I mean, I see developers just not having to worry about memory management and stuff. And so when something goes wrong, I don't know. It should do this. Well, yeah it should. But tell me why it's not.
The problem is always, I don't understand. Why is it happening this way? Well, maybe you should know, to your point, Jeff. All right.
Well, hopefully between you, Jeff, you and Olivier, we haven't alienated 500,000 listeners about their poor, habits. It would be a shame to lose that many. But anyway, Jeff, I wanted to thank you for joining us today. Your expertise in product leadership and agile development and scaling product teams was incredibly valuable. And I also wanted to say that to our listeners, the ones that are still going to listen and are not going to jump off onto another crummy podcast, we do hope you enjoyed this episode of Software Without Borders. Please excuse Jeff's comments. No, just kidding. Actually, the discussion was really interesting. And if you're interested in learning more about product management, remote team optimization, or the latest trends in software development, be sure to subscribe to our shows and leave only a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform.